In a quiet American suburb, at the end of Maple Street, stood an old Victorian house, long abandoned. The townspeople often passed it with wary glances, whispering about the strange occurrences that surrounded it. Lights flickered in the windows at odd hours, and shadows danced across the porch even when the air was still. Legend had it that the house belonged to the Whitaker family, who vanished one stormy night over 50 years ago. Neighbors reported hearing screams that echoed through the rain, but when they rushed over, the house stood silent and empty. The Whitakers were never found, and the house fell into disrepair, a dark stain on the otherwise cheerful street. One autumn, a college student named Jamie, eager for a thrill, decided to investigate the rumors. Armed with only a flashlight and her phone, she made her way to the front door, which creaked open as if inviting her in. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of mildew, but Jamie pressed on, driven by curiosity. The living room was a time capsule, with faded wallpaper and furniture draped in white sheets. As she moved deeper into the house, she heard a soft, distant laughter, like children playing. It sent a chill down her spine, but she brushed it off as her imagination. She reached the staircase, its steps groaning under her weight, and climbed to the second floor. In the hallway, she found a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she entered a nursery. A rocking chair sat in the corner, swaying gently despite the stillness around her. On the wall hung faded drawings of stick figures, and beneath them lay a dusty toy chest. As she approached, the laughter grew louder, now mixed with the faint sound of sobbing. Suddenly, the room grew colder. Jamie's breath hung in the air like fog. Heart pounding, she opened the toy chest, revealing a collection of tattered dolls. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow her as she rummaged through them. One doll, dressed in a frayed yellow dress, caught her attention. As she picked it up, the laughter stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. In that moment, Jamie felt an icy hand brush against her shoulder. She whipped around, but the hallway was empty. Panicking, she turned back to the doll, only to find it now grinning at her, its mouth wide and eerie. Terrified, she dropped it, and it clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the silence. Desperate to escape, she ran down the hall, but the shadows seemed to close in around her. The laughter resumed, now chaotic and echoing off the walls. She stumbled into the living room, where the front door slammed shut. Trapped, she turned to find the rocking chair moving faster, the air thick with an oppressive energy. In a desperate bid, Jamie charged at the door, slamming her shoulder against it. It held firm. The laughter morphed into wails, and suddenly, she felt herself being pulled backward as if the house itself was reaching for her. With every ounce of strength, she lunged for the window, shattering it with her fist. She climbed through the jagged opening, the glass cutting her skin, and fell into the damp grass outside. Gasping for breath, she scrambled away from the house, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on her back. As she looked up, the upper window of the Victorian house stood wide open. A shadowy figure, a woman in a faded white dress, appeared for just a moment, her face twisted in sorrow. Jamie didn't stop running until she reached the safety of the streetlights. The following day, she shared her experience with the townsfolk, but they only nodded knowingly. They told her about the Whitaker family, the children who had played in the nursery, and the mother who had wept for them. They said that the house had a way of trapping souls, that it craved company, and once you entered, it was hard to leave. Years passed, and the house still stood, whispering to those brave enough to approach. And on stormy nights, the laughter of children would drift through the air, echoing the pain of a family forever lost within the shadows of the old Victorian on Maple Street. Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that the house was calling to her, its whispers haunting her dreams. Every night, she'd wake in a cold sweat, the image of the woman in white etched in her mind. The townsfolk had warned her, but curiosity gnawed at her. What had really happened to the Whitaker family? And what if there was a way to help them? Determined to uncover the truth, she returned to the library, poring over old newspapers and town records. She discovered that the Whitakers had been a well-loved family, active in the community until their sudden disappearance. The last article written about them described a frantic search, culminating in the authorities declaring them missing, presumed dead. One name kept popping up: Old Man Hargrove, a reclusive neighbor who had lived next to the Whitakers. Rumors swirled about him being a hermit with strange practices, and Jamie felt drawn to find him. After a few inquiries, she learned he now lived in a dilapidated cabin deep in the woods. The following weekend, with a mix of excitement and dread, Jamie set out to find Hargrove. The path was overgrown, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. She felt the air grow heavy as she approached the cabin, a sense of foreboding washing over her. Hargrove was an old man with wild gray hair and sunken eyes that sparkled with a mix of wisdom and madness. He welcomed her inside, the smell of damp earth and herbs filling the air. "Ah, the curious one," he said, his voice gravelly. "You're here about the Whitakers, aren't you?" Jamie nodded, her heart racing. "What happened to them? Why does the house still linger?" Hargrove leaned closer, his expression shifting to something more serious. "They were good people, but they unwittingly awoke something in that house, a spirit that feeds on sorrow. It doesn't want them to leave, and it won't let anyone who enters find peace. They're trapped between this world and the next. Is there a way to help them?" Jamie asked, desperate for answers. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There is a ritual, but it requires courage and a pure heart. You must return to the house, confront what resides there, and invite the Whitakers to move on. But beware, the spirit will try to deceive you." The sun was setting as Jamie made her way back to Maple Street, the chill in the air deepening. The house loomed before her, its windows dark and foreboding. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the creaking porch. The door swung open, as if it had been waiting for her return. Inside, the atmosphere felt different, charged, alive. The shadows seemed to pulse with energy, and the whispers began anew, swirling around her like a tempest. Jamie focused, recalling Hargrove's words. She needed to reach out to the spirits of the Whitakers. "Arthur? Lila? Ben?" she called into the darkness. "I'm here to help you. You don't have to be afraid." The whispers intensified, morphing into cries of anguish. She felt a sudden gust of wind rush through the hallway, pushing her toward the nursery. Heart pounding, she followed, the rocking chair now eerily still. As she stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The doll she had dropped earlier lay on the floor, grinning at her as if mocking her fear. But Jamie steeled herself. She knelt beside the doll and closed her eyes. "I invite you to leave this place," she whispered. "You are not alone. It's time to move on." A shudder ran through the room, and the air thickened with an oppressive weight. The laughter returned, now mixed with sobs, and Jamie felt tears stinging her eyes. "I'm here for you," she urged, her voice breaking. "Please show yourselves." The room darkened, and she felt a presence grow stronger. The faint outline of a figure emerged: Lila, her small form trembling. "Help us," she whispered, her voice fragile and filled with despair. Jamie's heart ached. "I will. I promise." But before she could react, the temperature plummeted further, and the spirit of the house erupted in rage. Shadows swirled violently, and Jamie felt herself pulled toward the door, the walls closing in around her. "No!" she screamed, digging her heels into the floor. "You can't keep them here." Suddenly, the rocking chair flew across the room, crashing into the wall. The air crackled with energy, and the voice of the spirit echoed, deep and resonant. "They are mine. You cannot take them." But Jamie refused to give in. "They belong to the world. Let them go." She felt warmth spreading from her heart, a connection to the lost souls before her. "You don't have to keep them." In that moment, the room erupted in chaos. The shadows writhed as Lila and Ben appeared, their faces filled with hope. Arthur followed, strong but weary. "Together," Jamie urged, extending her hands toward them. "We can break this curse." With every ounce of strength, she pulled them closer, and the house shook with fury. The walls trembled as light began to pierce the darkness, illuminating the nursery. "Let go of your sorrow," Jamie shouted, feeling the energy swell. You can find peace. But the spirit howled, and in that instant, Jamie realized the true battle lay not just in saving the Whitakers, but in confronting the spirit that had held them captive. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. As the light filled the room, Jamie felt a surge of energy coursing through her. The cries of the spirit echoed around her, a chaotic symphony of rage and despair. Lila, Ben, and Arthur hovered close, their ethereal forms flickering like candle flames in a storm. Fight with us, Jamie called, determination anchoring her voice. You are stronger than it, the spirit shrieked, its shadowy form coiling around the Whitakers, trying to pull them back into the darkness. But Jamie stood firm, raising her hands higher, channeling her own fear into a force of light. You are not alone. Remember your love. Remember each other. With each word, the light brightened, pushing back against the oppressive shadows. Lila's eyes shone with newfound clarity. We can break free, she cried, reaching for her father's hand. Hold on tight, Arthur shouted, his voice resonating with authority. As the family joined hands, the air around them shimmered, creating a bridge of light that reached toward Jamie. The spirit howled, its fury palpable as it thrashed against the growing illumination. You cannot escape me, it bellowed, its voice a deep, echoing growl. But Jamie felt their connection deepen. The love of the Whitaker family resonated in her heart, merging with her own resolve. You are more than this place, she shouted, directing all her strength into the light. You can find peace beyond these walls. With a roar, the spirit lashed out one last time, and the room shook violently. Jamie's vision blurred, but she held on to the flickering forms of the Whitakers. Together, she cried. Together we can end this. The light surged forth, blinding in its intensity, wrapping around the family and engulfing the dark spirit. The shadows writhed, screaming in anguish as the light consumed them. Jamie felt a warmth envelop her, and she realized she was no longer alone. The Whitaker's presence was strong and vibrant. As the shadows dissipated, Jamie watched in awe as the spirit began to fragment, its anguished cries fading into whispers. The air grew lighter, the oppressive weight lifting. Thank you. Lila's voice was soft but filled with joy. We can finally go home. In a final burst of brilliance, the light enveloped the Whitakers, their forms glowing brighter until they dissolved into shimmering particles, floating away like dust in the wind. A calm settled over the nursery, leaving Jamie alone in the now silent room. As the last echoes of their laughter faded, Jamie felt a sense of profound relief wash over her. She had done it. The Whitakers were free. But as she turned to leave, a chill ran down her spine. The door creaked shut, and a whisper brushed against her ear. A soft, pleading voice that still lingered in the air. Stay. A sudden fear gripped her heart. The house still held its breath, and as she reached for the doorknob, it felt cold and unyielding. Shadows flitted across the walls, and she realized that the spirit had not been entirely vanquished. No! She gasped, backing away. The walls began to close in again, and she felt a powerful urge to flee. But in that moment of terror, Jamie remembered Hargrove's words. There was more than just the past that needed to be set free. The house itself held sorrow, a longing for what it had lost. With newfound resolve, Jamie took a deep breath and called out, I see you. I understand your pain. You don't have to stay trapped here. The air crackled, and the shadows around her shifted uneasily. She stepped closer, willing to confront whatever darkness remained. You were once loved. You can find peace too. Let go of your anger. The shadows coalesced, forming into a figure, a woman in a tattered dress, her face twisted in grief. They abandoned me, the spirit wailed, its voice echoing with loss. I couldn't protect them. You didn't abandon them, Jamie replied gently, her heart aching for the sorrow trapped within. You were left behind, but you can help others find their way home. With every ounce of compassion she could muster, Jamie reached out, allowing her light to touch the spirit. You have the power to let go, to forgive, and to move on. You are not alone. As she spoke, the shadows around the spirit flickered, revealing glimpses of a past filled with laughter and love of family, friends, memories that had long since faded. The spirit hesitated, its form wavering. Please, Jamie urged. Remember who you were. You can find peace. You just have to choose it. The spirit's expression softened, the anger dissipating like mist in the morning sun. I can't bear the thought of losing them again, it whispered, tears glistening in its spectral eyes. You won't lose them. They are waiting for you, Jamie reassured, feeling the connection deepen between them. You can join them. It's time. With a final surge of light, the spirit took a hesitant step forward. I'm so tired, it murmured, and in that moment, the shadows unraveled, wrapping around Jamie, merging with her light. The room brightened until it was nearly blinding. Jamie felt a wave of warmth wash over her, and with it came an overwhelming sense of peace. The spirit dissolved into shimmering particles, joining the Whitakers in a radiant embrace. As the last echoes of their presence faded, the air grew still and the house transformed. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth. Jamie blinked, feeling the heavy weight of sorrow lifted from the walls. She turned to leave, the door now wide open, inviting her into the night. With one last glance back, she whispered, "Thank you," and stepped into the cool air. The house on Maple Street stood quiet, a beacon of light amidst the shadows, no longer a prison but a sanctuary for memories. And though its whispers would remain, they would now be of peace, love, and the stories of those who had found their way home. As Jamie stepped out into the cool night air, she felt the weight of the house's sorrow lift from her shoulders. The once foreboding structure stood transformed, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight, its windows no longer flickering with ominous shadows but glowing warmly as if welcoming her back. She glanced back one last time. The whispers she had once feared now carried a melody of hope. The echoes of laughter filled her ears, reminding her of the love that had once thrived within those walls. A gentle breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves like a soft sigh of relief. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jamie turned away from the house and walked down Maple Street. She felt lighter, as if the burdens of both the Whitaker family and the house itself had been lifted. The night was peaceful, stars twinkling overhead, and she knew that she had not only freed the lost souls but also brought a sense of closure to her own curiosity. The next day, Jamie returned to the library, her heart full of a story she was eager to share. She pored over old records, determined to document the truth of the Whitakers and the spirit of the house. The townspeople had always shunned the place, but Jamie knew its history was more than just a ghost story. It was a testament to love, loss, and redemption. As the days turned into weeks, she gathered more information, spoke with the townsfolk, and even met with Old Man Hargrove again. He smiled knowingly as she recounted her experience, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and relief. "You did what many couldn't," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You brought them home." One rainy evening, as Jamie was finishing her notes, she received a call from a local historian. Intrigued, she answered. "I've heard what you've done with the Whitaker story," he said, his voice warm. "We'd like to include it in our upcoming exhibit on local legends. Would you be willing to share?" Excitement bubbled within her. This was her chance to tell the Whitaker family's story, to honor their memory and the spirit that had held them captive for so long. With a heartfelt, "Yes," Jamie agreed, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over her. The exhibit opened a few months later, showcasing the Whitaker family's life and the haunting beauty of the house. Jamie stood beside a large photograph of the Victorian, now known as a symbol of hope rather than despair. Visitors were drawn to the story, fascinated by the twists of fate that had allowed a young woman to free the lost souls. As the crowd mingled, Jamie felt a familiar presence at her side. She turned to see a faint, shimmering light, and she recognized the silhouettes of Lila, Ben, and Arthur standing nearby, their expressions peaceful and content. They smiled at her, their gratitude palpable. "You helped us?" Lila whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. "Thank you for remembering us." Tears filled Jamie's eyes as she nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. "You're free now. I'm so glad you're at peace." The exhibit continued to draw attention, and as the weeks passed, Jamie often visited the house. It had become a place of reflection, where people gathered to share stories and remember the importance of love and family. No longer a haunted relic, it transformed into a community gathering spot, filled with laughter and warmth. One autumn evening, as the sun set in a fiery sky, Jamie stood on the porch of the old Victorian, taking in the beauty surrounding her. The air was crisp, and she could hear children playing in the distance, their laughter echoing through the trees. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of belonging. The house, the town, and its history were now intertwined with her own. And as the first stars began to twinkle overhead, Jamie knew that the whispers of the past had become a gentle reminder of the bonds that tie us together, even in the face of loss. With a final glance at the house, she smiled, knowing that the spirits of the Whitakers and the essence of the home would forever remain in her heart, a story of hope that would continue to inspire generations to come. Write what story you would like to hear next. Write your answer in the comments.